this. Well, during this weekend's undisputed junior middleweight title fight, unified super middleweight champion Franchon Crews was asked, what does she want? What's she trying to do? And Franchon wants all the belts. Franchon has the good fortune of having a nemesis of sorts, a rival, if you will, that allows her to have an excellent fight. During this weekend's festivities, feeling inspired by the event, she immediately called for Undisputed. Furthermore, the unified champion took to social media as well, calling for all the belts.
Calling for Cederoos.
The statuesque Swede soccer player turned professional boxer turned unified champion. Elaine hasn't made a lot of noise in a while, but you gotta give the lady a lot of credit because she doesn't come from a deep amateur background. She transitioned from one sport into another, a sport that maybe doesn't even really translate into boxing in some ways, perhaps in others. She fought for her first world title after only five professional fights. She fought for the vacant IBF in what was her sixth professional fight against Femke Hermans for what was the vacant IBF title. That was the first title that she picked up. And she subsequently went on to unified titles in what was her eighth professional fight against New York's own Alicia Napoleon from Long Island.
The then reigning WBA champion.
In what actually was a sensational fight. I mean, that was one of those fights that was really a great advertisement for the sport because both girls, they gave it all they had.
And the sport needs more fights like that.
Because there was back and forth, because there was seesaw action, because it wasn't a mismatch and it wasn't just one way. Alicia Napoleon, she had her moments and Aline definitely had hers. She scored a knockdown.
Only thing that held up Alicia was the ropes.
Both girls in that fight, January of 2020, more than a year ago. Both girls fought like champions. That's what you need to see.
And that's who Franchon wants to fight.
Franchon, who does not shy away from a challenge, lest we forget, Franchon Crews debuted against Clarissa Shields, you understand. Very risky business. Became the division's unified champion, picking up the vacant WBC and WBO titles against Marisela Cornejo.
Defended them against Alejandra Jimenez.
And all the controversy associated with that fiasco, as Alejandra had an adverse finding in her VADA test. We still don't know what it was that she tested positive for, but it was enough to have the loss overturned on Franchon's record, and the world titles returned to her as well.
Justice was saved.
Franchon had the good fortune of actually having a fight in the last 12 months. She was actually in action in January of this year, whereas Aline, she hasn't fought in well over 12 months, so it's conceivable before it even becomes about unifying titles with Franchon, Aline may choose to have a tune-up fight first, a gimme fight, a fight to shake off the cobwebs, and that's understandable under these circumstances.
It is.
But this really is the only fight to make at 168 pounds. This would be a fight between the two best and brightest fighters in the super middleweight division. I think that this is a fight that does need to happen this year.
I don't see Aline calling out Franchon.
I won't accuse Aline of ducking or dodging this unification match, but I will say that I don't see the same enthusiasm being expressed from Aline that we're currently seeing from Franchon.
So does she want the fight or does she not want the fight?
That has yet to be determined. I don't know that any offers have gone out. Golden Boy Promotions, who promotes Franchon Crews, I don't know that any offers from them have gone out to Aline Cederoos in order to see the world titles unified in the super middleweight division.
But I'm hoping one does.
In other news, Australian up-and-coming talent Taylor Robertson is going to be squaring off against May Nixon March 13th. And, I looked high and low for information on this May Nixon girl. Didn't turn up any results. Don't know who she is, what she comes from. No fucking idea. But given that it's been over a year since Taylor Robertson had a fight, which was her pro debut, I think it's safe to assume that they're not going to throw her in there with a killer just yet. Not in what is only her second professional fight, and not after over a year of inactivity. Taylor Robertson didn't get to fight in the last 12 months.
The last time she had a fight was in February of last year.
Dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, having shut the industry down for a time, it likely was a different experience for everyone because there were some prospects that did manage to get out there and have fights. Prospects like Tatiana Zarazevskaya. We know that Kim Clavel of Canada, she traveled all the way to Mexico looking for action, looking for fights. So I think the experiences have been different for everyone navigating around this pandemic and trying to find ways to work around it. But poor Taylor didn't get to have a fight for 12 months.
Taylor ain't fought since February of last year.
This fight against Mia Nixon is set to go down in the Nissan Arena in Queensland. depending on what part of the world you're currently in, you can watch the fight on March 13th, IFL TV.
In case you're not aware, Taylor Robertson's an MTK Global fighter.
And when MTK Global says global, they fucking mean it. Taylor Robertson is one of Ring IQ's 2021 top prospects to watch moving forward. While this young fighter, only 22 years old, while this young fighter only actually has one professional fight under her belt, she did leave a lasting impression. She does show a high ceiling. She does exhibit the qualities that lead me to believe this young fighter is going to have a bright future. Keep your eyes peeled for that on March 13th. And welterweight news, the story seems to be that Manny Pacquiao is very likely to face Mikey Garcia in his very next fight. That comes as a surprise to no one, at least not to me, because that's who I always thought he was going to fight upon his ring return. The man's in his 40s. He's not the WBA champion anymore, thus he's not holding up any unification matches. There's no cause for criticism there, given everything that Manny's already done in his career. I think he's a guy who's got nothing to prove. I think he's a guy who's earned the right to go out how he wants to go out, and that's fine. But with that being said, that takes Manny out of the running for that Terence Crawford fight.
It does.
Given the asking price that Manny Pacquiao set for the fight with Terence Crawford, something to the tune of $40 million. I didn't view that fight as being very likely to happen, and it seems that time has proven me right. He is going to be fighting someone else.
That's fine.
I told you the people over there at Top Rank and ESPN aren't going to flip the bill for that kind of fight. They're not.
Short of somebody in Dubai doing it.
Flipping the bill, that fight was never going to happen.
Which fight seems most likely for Terence next?
Well, again, we are working with people, or actually the Pacquiao group is working with people in the Mideast who are real people and are going to finance this. We'll know for sure by tomorrow. If they come up with the money and finance the fight, then we would do it in this country in the Mideast, and Top Rank would be used by the country to work all the details of the promotion and that type of thing. But people in the country would be the actual promoters of the fight. And it would be a big opportunity for Terence Crawford to fight Manny Pacquiao. If that doesn't come to fruition, then I will continue my talks with Sean Porter and hope to do Terence against Sean Porter. Either of them are, in my opinion, interesting fights, but obviously Pacquiao is Pacquiao, and if Pacquiao can get in the ring with Crawford, obviously that's the way Terence would want to go.
That was the word from Uncle Bob just a little over a day ago by way of an interview via Boxing Social. More of the same kind of stuff you've been hearing the last couple of days, the last couple of weeks.
Preliminary talks.
Preliminary rumblings, and I have no stock in these rumblings because while all of this is being said and while all of this is being
Published.
reported, it's also being reported that Mikey Garcia is going to be fighting Manny Pacquiao, and I'd sooner believe that Mikey is going to be his next opponent instead of Terence Crawford.
Don't hold your breath waiting for Manny to fight Terence.
As far as I'm concerned, that fight was just never going to happen. Based on Bob's candor, the likeliest candidate to receive the Crawford fight is the PBC's own Sean Porter. Yet another name that's been tacked onto the name of Terence Crawford the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months, well over a year. I mean, we have been seeing a desire to see Terence Crawford lock horns with Sean Porter because we know that Sean Porter is a rough and rugged, rough and tumble welterweight who's proven at a certain level and who's given most every single fighter he's ever fought, win or lose, a difficult night, a hard time.
He's solid.
Battle-tested and a two-time welterweight champion, former IBF and former WBC 147-pound world titleist.
We know what he brings to the table.
We know what he brings to the ring, though the conversation in reference to this fight hasn't really changed much over time. I mean, there still are a lot of hang-ups about what the purse for the match is going to be, and to that I'll say what I told you guys before. You know, Teofimo Lopez just did
What I've been saying Sean should do.
I don't know where exactly we are with this fight and you know, whether or not Bob Arum and the people over there at Top Rank are starting to budge a little bit in reference to the negotiations, in reference to what they're willing to pay Sean. I don't know where we are with that. But if we haven't gotten anywhere, I stand by my original position. Sean Porter is the highest-ranked contender by way of the WBO. It's been over 12 months since Terence Crawford last satisfied a mandatory challenger for the WBO.
He's due to satisfy another one.
The last time Terence Crawford satisfied a mandatory challenger for the WBO was in December of 2019 against Mean Machine, Egidijus Gavaliauskas. That's the last time that happened. It's been over 12 months since then, a little over 12 months, and Sean Porter is in the pole position to be Terence Crawford's next mandatory challenger. And if Sean Porter really wants the fight, the way some people think he wants the fight, then why isn't pressure being applied to the WBO? That if you're not happy with the kind of money that Bob is willing to put up for the fight, if you're not happy with what he thinks you're worth, that's fine. You ain't gotta agree with that guy. You're the mandatory challenger.
It will be.
Push for the purse bid and see what the fight is worth in the open market, so that if you're not happy with what Bob's willing to pay you for the fight, maybe somebody else will pour more money into the pot. Maybe somebody else will pay you better, because maybe they think the fight is worth more than Bob does.
Then Bob thinks it is.
We just saw all of this play out with Teofimo Lopez and George Kambosos Jr. Teofimo Lopez wanted to be paid a certain way. He wasn't happy with the kind of money that Bob was willing to put up for the fight, so he looked for the money elsewhere, and he fucking found it. So what's stopping Sean from doing that?
I'm not attacking the guy.
I'm just covering all the bases. I'm just calling a spade a spade. If this guy wants the fight, as bad as some people thinks he wants the fight, not only does he have an avenue of opportunity to get it, he has an avenue of opportunity to see what the fight is really worth if he thinks that he's worth more than Bob says he is. His hands aren't tied. He's perfectly capable of pushing the WBO, applying pressure on the WBO to order the fight, set a deadline, and if a deal isn't reached by that deadline, let the fight go to a goddamn purse bid. Maybe somebody else will bid for the fight.
I'm not buying into any of these narratives from these YouTubers.
I'm not buying into all this crap about Bob Arum protecting Terence Crawford from Sean Porter. I'm not buying into Bob Arum sabotaging fights when I know better. I know that Sean Porter has the same avenue of opportunity that Teofimo Lopez had. Granted that the roles are a little different. You know, Teofimo Lopez, he is the reigning lightweight champion, whereas in this situation, Sean Porter is the challenger to the champion. But better still, Sean Porter has that same avenue of opportunity because he's in a pole position to become Terence's mandatory challenger. All he's got to do is pressure the WBO to order the goddamn fight, and once they order the goddamn fight and they set a deadline for a purse bid, if a deal isn't reached, given that Sean's not happy with the money Bob's trying to put up, you go to a purse bid, you see if an Eddie Hearn bids on the fight, or a Triller.
Since they bid on Lopez versus Kambosos Jr., maybe they'll put a bid in for this.
And you know what? If they don't, if neither a Triller or a Matchroom puts a bid in for the fight,
if they don't,
then as it turns out, as it would turn out, Bob Arum would be right. He's not trying to overpay you for this fight because he puts the fight's value in a certain place, in a certain ballpark. And if you can't try your luck in the open market and get more than what he's willing to put up, then he was right.
Are you going to let that stop you, though?
If it comes to that, are you going to let that stop you from challenging Terence Crawford for the WBO title? Because opportunities seem to be scarce over there on PBC Island. Keith Thurman's got nothing going on in terms of a fight date. What are you going to do? Sit out most of 2021 waiting for Errol Spence Jr. to give you the time of day?
Do you want this fight or do you not want this fight?
I think we'll find out shortly. And finally, in heavyweight news, Andy Ruiz, former unified heavyweight champion Andy Ruiz, took to Instagram to announce his upcoming pay-per-view with Chris Arreola. He says, "It's official, April 24th, we're back, baby. Can't wait to show everyone the hard work we've been putting in." To which Dillian Whyte replied, "Shut up, Andy." Dillian wanted to fight Andy. I'm sure most of you are all aware that an offer was made to Andy, a multi-million-dollar offer from Mr. Eddie Hearn over there at Matchroom, in order to stage a UK show between Andy and Dillian.
Remember?
When you think about what would have been on the line at the time, it wouldn't have just been an opportunity to make couple more millions for your bank account. It also would have been an opportunity for Andy to get himself in a pole position to challenge for the green belt, to challenge for the WBC title. Remember, Dillian Whyte hadn't lost to Alexander Povetkin yet. Alexander Povetkin didn't come into it until after Andy had already turned down the fight. That being said, not only would that have been an opportunity for Andy to make himself a couple of $1 million, rebound off the loss to Anthony Joshua, but it would have fast-tracked him to a world title shot, a world title opportunity.
He walked away from that.
And I get it. I understand why You know, he was between trainers, he's coming off a loss, he's on the rebound. He doesn't want to take on somebody like Dillian Whyte, who was then and still is ranked top 10 in the division. I get the reasoning, but you can't do this and then turn around and say that Dillian Whyte didn't want any smoke, the way that Andy Ruiz Jr. did.
You can't have it both ways.
You know, after former WBO champion Joseph Parker lost a decision to Anthony Joshua, in effect lost his WBO title, he took on Dillian Whyte right after that. He lost the fight, but better still, he didn't walk away from it the way that Andy did.
Didn't pass on it and then start talking shit.
And to fight who? Chris fucking Areola? Are you kidding me? Is he going to make fighting Chris Areola the millions of dollars that he would have made fighting Dillian Whyte? You know, as it turns out, Dillian Whyte lost to Alexander Povetkin. And call me crazy, but I think Andy packs enough punch that he could have perhaps stopped Dillian Whyte as well.
I don't think that's far-fetched.
I don't think that's crazy. I think Andy Ruiz stood a legitimate chance of winning that fight and winning that fight in the same fashion that Alexander Povetkin just did. But we'll never know. I should say, Andy didn't want to. Andy didn't want to know.
He'd rather fight Chris Areola.
And if he beats Chris Areola, which I think many of us are expecting him to, what's he going to do after that? What does beating Chris Areola get you?
What's that do for you?
If he would have fought Dillian and beat Dillian, he would have become the WBC's interim champion and been in a pole position to challenge for the green belt. And if whosoever holds the green belt doesn't want to give you your shot, they have to then surrender the title to you. It would have brought Andy closer to becoming a world champion again, but he didn't want that.
So what are we supposed to say?
I give a rat's very fucking ass that Dillian Whyte got himself knocked out against Alexander Povetkin, because Alexander, unlike Chris Areola, was ranked top 10 in the division, and he still is. That's who Dillian Whyte chose to fight. And even if he suffered the consequences of that, that still reflects better on him than Andy passing on a fight with Dillian to fight Chris Areola.
Just calling a spade a spade.
I'm just giving it to you straight. It's the only way I know how to give it to you.